Hey, welcome to week 4 of Strum It Up. We are increasing our technique ability and our vocabulary when it comes to the types of things we can add to our strum. We spent a lot of time the past 3 weeks working on getting in the groove, feeling rhythm in our body, translating it to the guitar in a way that feels natural. So we spent a lot of time with subdivisions. We spent a lot of time making sure that we really think about things first so that we don't have to think as hard while we're strumming. And this week, last week was the first week we had a real musical example to go off of. We spent time looking at the music. We spent time analyzing it, analyzing the rhythm, looking at the notes. This week we've got another musical example, but we're not going to get to it here in the very first part. Instead, we're going to be looking at how to incorporate different simple percussive techniques into your strum without seizing up. We want to keep that natural motion going, and then we want to add some flavor to it. Now we're going to be working with acoustic guitar, and we're going to be working with electric guitar, because it's a very different feel when you get into strumming and using some of these things like palm muting and slaps and mutes. It feels very different on the acoustic and on the electric. And a lot of people who play both, especially if they play mainly acoustic, they tend to strum and play the electric like the acoustic, and it doesn't sound quite right. The same happens if you mainly play electric and you go to the acoustic. You have to treat them differently. You can, the acoustic guitar, you can beat on it a lot more. You can, it's, whereas the electric guitar, you can beat on an electric guitar, but it's different. You don't have as big of a body to deal with. A lot of times with electric guitar, you're using distortion. And when you're using distortion, you don't necessarily want to strum all the strings all the time. You want to be a lot more selective. And that can cause people to tense up too, if you're trying to be too selective. We worked on that a little bit in the context of acoustic, but we're going to be going back and forth quite a bit. Here's this technique on the acoustic, and then here's how you adapt it so it sounds natural and native to the electric. So, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take a look at palm muting. We're going to take a look at palm muting on the acoustic first, and then we're going to see how it works on the electric. And I'm going to hold a regular A minor chord. That's all. All right, so in this A minor chord, we're not going to be playing our low E. And to assist with that, I'm muting with my thumb right here. Okay? Now, if I'm going to palm mute, I'm not going to do, this may seem obvious, but I'm not going to do alternate strumming. So we've talked about, let's tap our foot, 2, 3, 4, eighth notes. Alternate. I'm not going to do that when I'm palm muting. You could do that. For right now, we're not going to do that. It's harder to be consistent. Instead, we're going to do just downstrokes, eighth notes. Notice I've still got a very complete motion though. I'm not doing this, where I'm stopping. I'm letting my hand still swing. So my hand has a 16th note motion, right? Because it's all down, and I'm doing down eighth notes. Now, I'm doing this, and there's a couple things that if I didn't point them out to you verbally and show you, you'd probably blow past them. I know I did for years. When I'm palm muting on an acoustic, I'm bouncing off the bridge. A lot of people don't think about this, but it sounds natural to do it. Listen to it without the bounce. I'm restricting my motion. This might sound okay on an electric, and we'll get there in a second. With an acoustic, you want that percussion, and you want them to be muted, but in general, you want a little bit more ring out of it. The acoustic doesn't have as much sustain. So if you look at this angle here, watch. Not this. This. So if I'm slowing that down, I'm angling it, picking, and then letting go, and letting the motion aid in that bounce. It sounds a lot different than this. You're striking the string at the same time. You're striking with the pick at the same time that this part of your hand right here hits just above the bridge. Let me do it again. Okay, so let's look at all the components of this again. Again, I'm not merely resting my palm. That's absolutely a good sound and can be used. But we want to know how to do both so that when we're palm muting, we're doing the thing that's right for the song or the right for the groove, and not just because we don't know how to do either. It's my opinion that the locked, the resting palm is much more of an electric thing. It sounds better on an electric. And the bouncing palm, it's a little livelier, and it works in the context of acoustic strumming, which you'll see in a minute, a little bit better than the other one. If you're strumming and you're muting parts of the groove, let's, something like this. That would be hard to plant your palm. You have to tense up. Watch. You can't keep that motion going because you're not bouncing off the strings. Versus and we're going to do a strum pattern similar to that in our example. So that's palm muting on the acoustic. Now I'm going to go to an E minor chord, so we'll go from E minor to A minor. We don't have the mute going on here with our left hand anymore. Again, the bouncing mute, you're keeping that hand going. All right, now, we're going to do that exact same thing, but we're going to go to the electric, and you're going to see how things change. So, I'm going to switch over to my electric real quick. All right, now, the electric is a smaller body. You're not out like this. You're in. You've got less motion that your whole elbow has to travel in order to cross all the strings. You've got a couple other things to consider also. You've got, in this case, and in many of your cases, you've got a floating bridge. You've got thinner strings. So you can't attack them like you did on the acoustic. You've got pickups. So if you're slapping or applying too much pressure to your electric guitar, you're going to hit the strings on the pickups, which sounds wretched. Now, I'm going to take the exact feel that I had on the acoustic, and I'm going to palm mute using the A minor chord. It doesn't have the same effect. It doesn't sound as good. There's a couple things wrong, and I mentioned them. To me, that sounds inarticulate and incomplete. This, having the locked palm on an electric, works much better for me. That sounds more like what you'd hear on a recording on an electric. The other one sounds more like what you'd hear on a recording on an acoustic. It's tighter. Notice I still have a good motion going in my... I'm not doing this. I'm still engaging my wrist. Okay, now there's a couple things that you want to keep in mind, especially with a floating bridge. My palm placement on an electric guitar, it sort of naturally falls on the acoustic guitar in the right place. There's a nice feel for it. With an electric, it's not always the case. There's very different bridges. You know, a Les Paul bridge, the scale is shorter, and so you're choked up a little bit more when you're palm muting. In this case, I've got a floating bridge. This can really create issues when you're palm muting if you're not careful. If I'm resting too hard on my bridge, which if you're tensing up you might, it'll actually do this. Notice? It's pulling it sharp. Because I'm resting my palm here, too far up. It's also a little bit dead. But this is one of those things, I hear this a lot from people when they're doing, you know, a lot of people will be like, oh, I'm recording and my guitar won't stay in tune. It's fine when I'm tuning it or when I'm playing open strings. And as soon as I go into palm mute, it sounds sharp. Well, are you too far forward? You don't notice this so much on the acoustic, especially if you're doing that bouncing palm mute like I illustrated. But with the electric guitar, it's easy to accidentally do. Pulling it sharp. There you go. Now, the other thing you can do is you can go too far back. And that was really obvious, but this isn't so much. I'm still palm muting it. You're going sharp. It may seem obvious, but this bites people all the time, and it bit me, and it continues to sometimes. When I'm on stage and I'm standing and I'm a little bit more tense than, you know, I've got people watching and etc., I tend to not move as freely, and sometimes the bridge, I push on the bridge when I palm mute. Draws it sharp. So just keep those things in mind when it comes to palm muting. With electric guitar, I use planted palm predominantly. With a light touch. Just in front of my bridge, not right on the saddles, but I feel the saddles kind of back here, and my palm is resting right in front. If you're resting on the saddles like this, you're not going to get as much palm muting ability in terms of deadening, and you're likely going to pull your bridge sharp if you've got a floating bridge. Now, with acoustic guitar, I recommend the floating mute or the bouncing mute, which just, you can do either on either electric or acoustic. But as you heard, one sounds more natural on one and the other sounds more natural on the other. Let's transition back to the acoustic guitar now, and we're going to look at general strumming. Okay? Now, general strumming is something that we've gone over quite a bit with the acoustic guitar, where we're do you remember when we talked about with At the Fair last week, we talked about targeting low strings and high strings. Now the acoustic guitar with a clean sound is much more forgiving when it comes to registers. You can strum all the strings as long as it's in the chord, and that's just how it was meant to be. I mean, it feels good, it sounds good. On an electric guitar, you're not always going to be strumming all the strings. You're not always going to be quite as open with what you're doing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to incorporate something called a slap on the acoustic guitar. It's sort of like the bouncing palm mute. We're going to do it on a G. And what I'm doing here is a G5. So I've got my I got everything on my 3rd fret, and then I've got my A string muted. Okay, so I don't have my 3rd in the chord. Now I'm going to do the palm mute, the bouncing palm mute, real quick. Kind of cool. You get a look. Now, all I'm going to do for the slap, and slap is not, you've seen some people do, you know, like a, I'm not going to do that. All I'm going to do is I'm going to move my hand up so I'm not touching the palm to the bridge anymore. But that's not quite enough. You hear notes squeaking out, right? Particularly on those higher strings. So this is a 2-step process. In order to get this slap or this interruption in your sound, you want to move your hand up a little bit so you're not landing on the bridge, and you want to use left hand muting. So it's going to look like with your left hand or your fret hand, I'm going to do this, like that. So there's without this side, and just with your left hand. Get my motion going here. Okay, so I've isolated the two. Now I'm going to put them together. you notice when I get up to speed, I'm not doing an obvious, out of position thing. What I'm doing is I'm lifting up on the strings and I'm putting my first finger down, at least on this chord, so that I'm doing my best to mute all I can with this hand while slapping with this hand. And that gets rid of the noise, and those two things combined create that nice percussive slap. Let's go to a different chord. Let's do E. So you notice there, whatever I can do so that both my hands are engaged in muting. Okay, so that's a basic slap. Again, it's not your a lot of people are all the percussive sort of things. A lot of people do that. That's not what we're doing. We're incorporating sort of a conventional slap or mute within a strum pattern, and it can be used with any strum pattern. It works really well for me in general to come off an upstroke on a 16th note sort of pattern. Okay, let's go to the electric and see how that translates. Now I'm purposely using a little bit of a driven sound. Now, we started out when we're talking about general strumming. I mentioned that the acoustic is very forgiving, and it's often very appropriate to strum all the strings. All right? Now, when you do that on an electric, sometimes it can sound okay. Other times it sounds really, really muddy. If we go back to our A minor and our E minor, I'll just do that same strum pattern I was doing with a slap, similar to what I was doing there. Once I started incorporating the finger mutes with the slap, it sounded better. And certainly there are genres where that works, but it's a lot messier sounding. There's things, and if you're going for that, do it. But you want to be aware of the ways that you want to change your technique to sound more controlled or whatever on the electric guitar. And then if you want to break those rules intentionally, fine. But don't not learn it. Be able to be clean and messy and do it on purpose. So, what do? How does the slap and how is general strumming adapted so it sounds more controlled on a semi-gainy sounding guitar? So, here, let's do the A minor. First of all, we're going to talk about we're going to leave the slap out of it for just a second, and we're going to talk about selective playing, selective string playing. Most of the time, the electric guitar, when it's distorted especially, does not need to do this. It just doesn't happen that often. You're using a power chord, or you're using two notes, like even that, strumming that doesn't sound right. We'll go over that in a second. But that's the same strum pattern I was doing over there, but I'm intentionally isolating it to those strings. Now, I'm also doing the bouncing palm mute. I'm kind of doing that just because I was doing it on the acoustic. That doesn't make as much sense. Let's see what happens when I move my palm out a little bit and do the mute or the slap. It's still not doing it for me. Okay, it works great on the acoustic. It doesn't work well here. How can we adapt this pattern to make it sound good? Well, here's one thing. Down, up stuff doesn't work as well on the electric as it does on the acoustic. The acoustic, when you're strumming, tends to be a lot more shakerish, a lot more metronome-ish. The electric, because of the sustain, because of the role it usually plays in songs, a lot of times you might want to do more downstrokes. Hear the difference? Now, you could even include some of these other notes. Now, you see what I've done though? I have all these techniques that are sort of similar. They have some of the same effect on the electric, some of the same effect on the acoustic, but I'm designing the part that I'm playing, even though it's the same rhythm. I'm designing the part around my tone, around the instrument, around what I want to have happen. I'm being very intentional about how it sounds and picking and modifying my techniques to get a specific sound. They're not the same instrument. They shouldn't be played the same. You can start from sort of the same vantage point, but I hope you're seeing that the way you approach rhythm playing is very, very different. It's much more close quarters with an electric, especially when you're playing with drive. You don't use all the strings. Again, there's always rules to be broken, right? But I'm sure you heard what happened when I narrowed things down here. Now, if I go back to the acoustic and I do that, again, there might be certain times where that's good. And if you're using it in your writing and you're intentional about it, great. But most of the time, the acoustic is more wide open. And it sounds better more wide open. Now, certainly you've heard that, before. Third eye blind sort of sound maybe. And sometimes they'll do that, but if there's an acoustic guitar present in that song, I'll bet you this isn't doing that. The acoustic is open, and you maybe hear something more like this. Notice the closed palm, more downstrokes, etc. So there are the slaps, mutes, palms, and progress when it comes to looking at how you approach them differently on each instrument. Do we have any questions pertaining to that before we get to our example?
No specific questions so far, but we have a number of people that I think could use just going through it slower.
Yeah.
Just going through those techniques a little bit slower.
Yeah.
And let us know your questions, guys, while Chris kind of goes over some of that.
Okay. Now, all of them slower on both instruments, or is there something more specific?
It seems like a general.
Slow down. Okay, cool. I'll start with the electric since I've got that in my hand. We're going to look at palm muting again. Notice this is the closed palm muting, where I'm not bouncing off the strings. Palm right in front of the bridge. And I'm targeting these three strings. These three. I'm not bouncing. That doesn't work as well on the electric. Okay, now when I'm strumming, when I'm doing full strums on the electric, oftentimes that doesn't sound as good, so I'm going to choose to target certain notes. Let's go back to our A minor to E minor. So here's the way you would strum that on an acoustic. That sounds sloppy to me. Instead, you're going to adapt that same sort of rhythm feel. And I'm just using this as a sort of a generic strum. You can do this with any strum. The main thing is you want to be cognizant and listening now that you know that you should be approaching them differently. So here's the same strum pattern, but I'm adapting it to the electric. Strategic palm muting rather than the slap. Did you notice that I'm not doing a slap? I'm doing palm muting, and I'm coming in here with downstrokes to accomplish the same rhythm. All right? Let's go back to the acoustic now. We'll take a look at those same techniques. All right, so that wide open strum sounds much better here. The closed palm muting doesn't have the same effect, right? That's what I was doing on the electric, but this is where that bounce with the palm muting works much better. Get a little bit more ring. Okay? Now, the slap that we talked about, which is more specific to an acoustic, has to do with getting off the bridge, bringing your strumming forward a little bit so that you're off the bridge. You're no longer palm muting, you're muting. And then you're also using something in this hand, in your fret hand, in order to get the sound to stop. So that would sound like this. Let's take that up to a C sharp minor, a bar chord. It's much easier to do when you're barring the whole thing, right? Because you can simply lift up. Slow that way down. Now notice you see me lifting up and then replanting right in time with my strum. So, we've got planted palm, bouncing palm, slap mute, using both hands, by bringing this forward and using a part of your hand over here to mute. And then we are being cognizant of which kind of guitar we are playing and adapting our strumming so that it sounds more native or appropriate for the instrument that we're playing. In other words, we're not just saying that because I can strum on an acoustic that you're adapting the same mindset, the same strumming motion. You still want to be free with it, but you want to be more selective and honed in on the electric guitar. No less energy, no less freedom, no less groove implanting itself in your body and oozing out your hands. You still want all that. But you don't want to approach the electric strumming as open as you do on an acoustic. And I hope you saw the examples of that. All right. Was that helpful in terms of sort of a good recap? And do we have any other questions?
Okay. I do have a couple questions.
Okay.
Let us know on the chat if that makes more sense with that walkthrough. Okay, from Greg GP, what do you think is better, closed hand or open for strumming, and why? And actually, that was kind of a combination between him and OCS 1986 on that question.
Okay, on your strumming hand, closed or open for strumming. I really prefer to keep my hand open, and particularly in the context of some of the things we were doing tonight, I feel like if my hand is closed, I can't. It gets in the way of palm muting. It actually hurts my pinky. Watch. I'm like digging it's a pointless thing to have I can't do it. So I keep my hand open. And I do that. You saw on the electric too. I keep my hand open, and this goes back even to my picking technique. And Chad, you don't have to change things around. I'm just going to do a quick thing here. But if we go back to the electric, even, if I'm strumming, if I do this, again, the same thing happens. But the other thing that it doesn't free me up to be able to do is play lead very well. Like if I'm picking, I can. But watch what happens when I go to strum. It just doesn't work for me. Immediately my fingers get in the way. If I leave, to me, having my hand open and relaxed makes me more free to go between leads and strumming. Notice there's not much difference. I would recommend, for me, some people can seem to put the fingers closed. It doesn't work for me. It actually hurts. and I think most people, if you got that motion going like you're supposed to, it will get in the way. So open up your hands, relax. Last time, or the time before, we went over, I think it was session 2, we went over how to hold the pick. I'm not going to go over that again. But if you go back and watch that on session 2, you'll see why open-handed relaxedness and the focus on getting your pick in the right place for what you're doing is key. So.
Okay, here's another question from Amit Upredi. While strumming, my pick got stuck in the middle. Any suggestion?
Your pick got stuck in the middle. What does that mean? Got stuck in the middle of your strings? Did it move in your hands? I'll wait for a reply on that one, and maybe we can take another question.
That's all the questions we have for right now.
Okay. Cool. Is this making sense, everyone? We're going to go on to the example. And the example you can find in PDF form, or we'll have it on the screen as well. And this little piece, it's just a mini song, is called Sad But Cool. And it gives us an opportunity to apply these things on both guitars. Now, just like we did with our last example, I'm going to put the guitar down, and we're going to look at the piece of music. We're going to look at the rhythms. We're going to figure out what the rhythms are before we go to the guitar. And we're going to internalize the groove. We're going to get familiar with how things look and sound, and then we're going to try playing it. So I'm putting all guitars down, and we're looking at the first page. The first page, you can see we're at 85 beats per minute. Well, what does 85 beats per minute sound like? Okay, that's a quarter note. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and you can see, really, other than that last measure of the second line, this whole first page is eighth notes. So we better be able to feel the eighth note over 85 beats per minute. Let's see if we can do it. 3, 4, 1, and 2. Tapping and clapping. Hope you're doing this with me as you're looking at the PDF. Okay, now, if you go down to the last line of the first page, and this will be different when you're looking at it on screen, that would be measure number 17. Go down to measure number 17. You'll notice that there are 16th notes. There's a little bit of 16th notes that are happening. So, I wonder if we're missing a page there, Chad. Go back one page. Measure 17. So there's measure 14.
Yeah, that's all we've got in here.
Okay, so we're missing measure 17. We're missing lines, so measure 15. We're missing measure 15, 16, and 17. Bummer. Well, check out the PDF to get the full picture of what's going on. The same thing. Go back to measure 18. Yeah, we have measure 18 on the screen. You'll notice there are 16th notes in there. Now, what is this rhythm? We've got dots. We've got 16ths. We've got these X's. I bet you can guess what the X is. The X is probably the slap with the mute. How are we going to figure this rhythm out? Well, we can listen to it, and we will listen to it, but we're going to listen to it after we try to count this, okay? So, we've got a dotted eighth followed by a single 16th here. What that is if you're counting 16th notes, 1 E and 1 E and 1 That's what that is. You're taking out the E and you're on the 1 and you're sounding on the So if we are to clap just that, we got to get into 16th notes so we can feel that. 1 E and 1 E and. So let's do 8th notes. 1 E and. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep my 16th notes going, and I'm going to count. I'm going to say where the 16th notes land. 1, 1. I'm going to try it. And 1, and 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. Da 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 da. Okay, I'm feeling it. Da 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 da. That's difficult, but you notice what I did. I had to feel the overall pulse. This is why this is so important. I had to feel the overall pulse. I'm tapping my foot. I had to get the quickest or smallest possible subdivision that is consistent in the song internalized also, and then I had to create a third channel, which in this case was my tongue, to feel that rhythm. All right? That's what a dotted 8th joined with a single 16th sounds like. Da, 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 da. Now I have the 16th in my leg, but if we're da 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 da. Now I'm breathing, I'm feeling the 16th notes in my breath. Okay, now, next we have an 8th tied, or not tied, but joined in stem. And the stems don't really mean much, it's just sort of an organizational thing. But we've got an 8th note, and then we've got that other dotted 8th tied to, not tied, I'm sorry, a dotted 8th, and then we've got the 16th. Then we have another 8th, and then we have this last grouping. We're looking at measure 18. We've got an 8th note followed by 2 16th notes. So that is basically the same thing as we just did, except for we're sounding one more 16th note. So let's feel it out. Let's make sure we can get it. And then we'll have all of the components of this rhythm, and we can try to put it all together. Then we'll go for the guitar. Okay? So, got my quarter note going. Now the smallest subdivision here is 16th note. So I'm going to 1 E and 1 E and 2 E and well, it's the second 16th note that's not there. So we got 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. 1 and da 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 da. Got to keep that consistent. Internalize the groove. Da 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 da. All right, so we've broken down the rhythm. We're figuring it out. Okay, now let's take the different components and bring them to the guitar. 1, 2. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start the click. 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and. Okay, I've got the 16th note groove. I'm tapping my foot. Now, How are we going to internalize some of these rhythms? Ah, rhythms sound familiar? Now what I did is I kept my hand going 16th notes, but I'm only playing that last 16th note there. We're talking about just that very first set of stems. See what I'm doing? I'm intentionally stopping. But if you're watching my foot and watching my arm, okay, now the last one. 1E and a, 1E and a, 1E. Okay, I'm isolating it out. Now I'm going to try to put it all together. I'm not going to strum it yet, I'm just going to tap it. So I'll measure 18. Okay. Are you following me still? All right. Now, we have internalized the different rhythms. I think we're pretty close. Let's listen along. And again, I'm sorry you're missing 3 measures. But go ahead and listen along here. It's going to be robotic, which is the result of not internalizing rhythm or having a computer play your stuff for you, but we'll at least be able to get a sense of the rhythm and see how close we were. Measure 2. I'm going to start over again. Measure 1. Measure 3. Measure 4. I'm sorry, measure 5, line 2. Coming up on some half notes here. Measure 8. Ah, I didn't catch that when I was just looking at it. There's an accent there. There's an accent on 2. Quarter, 8th. Oh, another rhythm that we forgot about. So there's some more rhythms to work on. But we got the basic groove. Let's look at measure, was that 23? There's some good candidates for our slap mute there on the acoustic guitar. So I'm just going to use, we're going to use E minor, because this is in the key of E minor. Now that's that same dotted 8th to 16th note figure followed by full 16th notes, and it happens twice. So there I completely abandoned the chord. Slap down on that first part of the 16th note where everything's X'd. Got to get that cleaner. Now, I had a tendency when I first started doing it to stop my motion. Watch, I was doing this. that doesn't feel as natural. I need to make sure and keep this going. Again, we're at measure 23. Okay, so we have that other rhythm. Now, these rhythms, because there's scratches in there, it's actually harder to go and figure them out scratching the whole thing first. We're going to do it anyway because we want to make sure that we're not thinking about the chords, we're not thinking about the left hand until we're completely done internalizing the groove. So we're going to start from the beginning. I'm going to play along with this, but I'm just going to scratch, and I'm going to try to play the rhythms along with it. Now, this isn't something, as you're playing along with me, if you're not getting this right away, I totally get it. You have to take time to internalize these rhythms. And we are taking time to do that here, but everybody's going to learn at a slightly different pace. I'm going to take this next section nice and slow. We're going to do this quite a lot in terms of internalizing these rhythms over this chart. Pull out your guitar, play along with me. Don't be afraid to screw up. Here it is from the beginning. I'm going to go down strums only, keeping my 16th note arm going. Not worrying about chords, just strumming along. Am I free? Am I relaxed? Ooh. Keep your arm going even with those quarter notes. Or half notes. Oh, I got that accent. Let's practice that. So that wouldn't be palm muted. That would be full. I'm doing the bouncing palm. Notice what I'm doing with my hand. Bouncing palm mute, except on that accent. So there's a quarter note in that first measure. Okay, here we go. Okay, not bad for a first time through. A couple things that really hit me when I started looking at the score and really playing along with it in terms of strumming. First of all, and I mentioned them as we were going, but I'll mention them again. We've got those half notes there on the second line down, and I was tempted to let my groove falter, but I want to make sure when I'm doing that. So we were doing this palm muting thing. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 3, 1. I'm keeping that going the whole time. It's my metronome. My body is my metronome, or at least it's helping along with the metronome I'm hearing. Then the accents. So I'll fret a chord so you can hear. I'll do E minor. We're palm muting. And then on 2, after starting on the third line, so if we were to count that, 1 and 2, and, I'm sorry, that would be on beat 3. I've said beat 2 twice now. It should be beat 3. 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2. Maybe it's not a completely full strum. Internalize that feel. Okay, next there was, now this is, I think you're missing these 15, but you can see them on the PDF if you download the materials.
They're actually not on the PDF either.
Oh, really?
So
they will be on the Guitar Pro file if you happen to have Guitar Pro. I'll email the necessary people and get that fixed this week. So we do have on measure 16, which you guys don't see unless you have Guitar Pro at this point. You've got a quarter note followed by a bunch of eighth notes. So that rhythm would be quarter note. See, here's our pulse. 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 1. There's another rhythm there. All right. Any pertinent questions before we start looking at the tab itself?
I think they can wait till after that.
Cool. All right. So, like last week, there are no chords. We have to look at the tab and determine what we are playing. There's no chords written in. Even though I gave it away, it's in E minor. Our first two measures has 0, 2, 2. So we're palm muting, we're only playing the low strings, eighth notes. Okay, what's next? We've got 3, 3, 2. So I'm going to play that like this. Okay. There's two measures of that. That's basically a C chord with a G in the bass. We're only playing those lower strings. And then it looks like we slide up 2 frets. It's the same form, we just slide everything up 2 frets. Cool, that's a sort of a D chord with an A in the bass. So we've got this form, and this form. Let's play the first 2 lines. 2, really slow. 1 and 2 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Switch to this. C, 2, 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 4. Back to 2. Back to our E minor. Okay, now we've got 2 full chords. Now, reading this, we got the 3, 3, 2, which is the same as we've done before, but we're going to strum all the strings here. We're not palm muting anymore. So we've got a C, full C, with the G in the bass, and then it looks like we're moving the same formation all the way up. Create a nice dissonant sounding D chord of origin. That's nice. So we go from here. We're on the last part of the second line. And 3 and 4 and open up. So if we practice that again, and 2 and 3 and 4 and back to the palm muting, third line down. Now here's where that accent comes in. It looks like we've got our 0, 2, 2. Looks like it's the same form for the next 2 lines, except for we don't have those half notes again. So let's keep going through it. 3, 2, 2. That happens twice with the accent. 5, 5, 4. All the way to measure 15. Let's take it to there. 1 and 2. So we're at the very beginning now. And 1. I'll do it slower. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 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 2 and 3 and there's that accent coming in. Okay, Okay, now we go back to our E minor, measure 15. Then we got this open again. This is the part you don't have, so I'm just going to tell you. This is measure 15, 16, and 17. And then 2/8 notes. And then we have an eighth note, but we have a walk down. We've got that going on. So this is measure 16. It's challenging because we want to keep that pulse going. Remember, we talked about this a lot last week, that it's better to be groovy than accurate, right? We don't want this. We don't want this. That's not groovy. That's accurate, but it's not groovy. Now here's really groovy, but not accurate. That sounds better to me. See if we can land somewhere in the middle. And don't be afraid to take the same measures over and over again until you can internalize them. We spent a lot of time internalizing them without the guitar. You're going to have to spend time internalizing them with the guitar as well. If you're adding a little bit of extra strums in there, it doesn't matter, as long as you have the essence of the groove, like we've been saying before. There, I hit different strings. That's okay. We've got the essence of it. Okay, moving on. We've got that rhythm, where we've got that slap. Let's see. It looks like it's on the E minor, the whole first measure through, so measure 17 through 18, that top of the page which you guys have there. So for you guys, we're repeating measure 18 twice. So. Is that right? Let's look at. Yep. Let's hone in on that pick slap, that mute. Maybe I don't want to do quite as much of a slap. I like that. I like it better than. But who knows? Maybe when I play the whole thing together, I want to be flexible, but I want to feel it either way. Remember, groove over exact note accuracy, right? You want to get the essence of the groove. Okay, that rhythm is starting to feel internalized. Let's look at the rest of the chords here. So it's the same. It looks like we're full on all strings. At least that's what's notated through the end. So we'll start at measure 18. Well, really measure 17, but we'll do 18 twice for you guys. Okay. So after 2 measures of the E, we go to the C, and it's the full C. Same rhythm. Up to the D. Then we have this cool yeah, we got that. And then the last measure eighth notes followed by a bunch of 16th notes. So this is a build here. And then we're done. Okay. There's a lot there, even though it's very repetitive, right? So, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go back to the beginning. We're going to listen to it and play along with it. See what happens. But you know what? This is the first time through, even though it's at 85 beats per minute. Let's slow her down. Slow her down. We'll go to 80% speed. See how that feels. Make sure you're loose. It's okay if you make a bunch of mistakes. Make it your goal to make 1 mistake per measure. It's okay. We're one a groove. We're getting familiar with it. Here we go. Now, I was pushing the beat something fierce there because I wanted to go faster, but in certain places I shouldn't have gone faster because I blew it. So when you're practicing this kind of thing, and this gets really into the heart of how to practice. I wanted to go faster, but there were clearly parts that I wasn't comfortable enough with to go faster. So I need to refocus my brain on getting in the groove so that I'm not pushing that beat and allow myself the freedom to play it well slow. So I'm going to take the whole thing again at that speed, even though it's kind of painful. And I'm going to focus more. I'm going to focus on getting the right notes. But I'm going to focus more on not pushing that beat. We'll do it again. How are we doing? Any are questions piling up, or are we just watching? Good?
Two related to this, yes.
Okay. Am I grooving? an amazing difference. Yeah, I hit some wrong notes here and there, but I was playing even a little bit behind the beat, which is where you want to be most of the time. Think a little bit behind the beat so you're not pushing. But I was internalizing that groove, and it became, because I was internalizing the groove, it became a natural feel. It didn't feel too slow that time because I wasn't trying to push it. A lot of times when you're in a band situation, you're playing with other people and something feels too slow, maybe it is. But if you embrace the tempo that it's at and play it where it's at and get in that groove, it may be just fine. So keep that in mind. I'm going to bring this up to full speed now, play it a couple times on the acoustic, and then we're going to take it over the electric and see how we need to adjust our feel, adjust our perspective of the techniques we're doing, palm muting, the slaps, the mutes, to make it sound a little bit better in that context. All right? So here's full speed. I fell asleep at the end there with that palm muting, or with the slapping. Now, a couple things about that. I got used to the old groove, the old tempo, and I had to reacclimate to that faster tempo. The other thing that I started to notice in my playing, as I got acclimated to the faster groove, I loosened up, and I added, because I'm keeping that 16th note feel going the whole time, there was definitely some, ghost strokes, some things that crept in as a result of that. So that is okay. In fact, that should happen. If it's not happening, you're being too robotic. Don't play exactly what's written. Use it as a guide. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to mute the horrible robot guitar, and we're going to play it from the top. And we're not going to worry. We're not going to worry so much about, oh, I played exactly half notes, or I'm playing exactly that rhythm. We're going to get in the groove and make sure that we're with the click and that we're feeling it and using this as a guide. So here we go. You know what? I'm doing accents probably too soon, which, again, we want to be free, but we also want to realize that those accents are later in the score because we're adding to the build, we're adding to the dynamic. So I need to be attentive to that. So let's start over again. All palm muting at the beginning. was the end. Now, it's amazing. Getting the other one out of there so I wasn't pressured. I'm following along with the music, making sure that I'm sticking to the dynamics and playing generally what's there, but I'm not reading the music. I'm not merely listening to it and regurgitating it as I was a little bit more when the dummy track was on. I was interpreting the music, and that's what good musicians do. They interpret the music. So I felt like I still got work to do to make that, perfect, but I feel like I'm in the groove. I feel like I've internalized it on the acoustic. Let's see what happens when we go over to the electric. It feels so tiny. Okay, right away, we don't want to do our bouncy palm muting. We want to relax. We don't want to beat this guitar like we beat the other ones, or like we beat the acoustic. So, you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to need to spend time with the scale of the guitar. Okay. So let's go through the music here. Obviously this might sound okay as long as we're not, probably don't want to be as open. Let's just see what happens. I'm going to play with the dummy guitar first and then without it. But I'm going to close in my palm muting so that I'm resting instead of bouncing. And then when it comes to that strum at the end, if you were to strum it like an acoustic guitarist, it would be, that doesn't sound very good. So I might do, the palm mute will be replaced with the slap will be replaced with a palm mute. Maybe we do all downstrokes. Not all downstrokes, but I'm accenting on all downs. Okay, so you definitely have to close in a little bit. I've decided I'm not going to use the slap thing. I'm going to use palm mutes, and I'm going to do more downstrokes on that end rhythm. I'm probably going to open up the same, well, at least see what it sounds like on measure 8, but I need to be careful. Probably there's another acoustic guitar player strumming along with me, so let's try it. Here we go. Right. Now, that was pretty good. I did everything I said I was going to do. And you notice it is a different feel, and it should be a different sound because it's a different feel. If you walk away with nothing else from this session tonight, it is this groove, these two guitars, and myself. We're all brought here tonight to tell you that the electric and the acoustic guitar are different instruments, and many times fill very different roles if you know what to look for with your strumming. So, that is the end of the lesson portion. You may now ask questions and let me know. Give me some feedback. Was this helpful? Did you make the connection between the differences between the two instruments? Did you get something out of the different basic percussive techniques we've worked on tonight? How was the pacing? Give me some feedback.
Okay, this one related to the exercise here. Can you explain again how to mute the upstroke 16th notes in measure 23?
Yes, I can. Electric or acoustic? We'll go over both.
I think it was when you were using the acoustic, but
Okay.
probably won't hurt to do both.
We'll go back to the acoustic then. Okay, so we got full chordage there. I'm gonna loop it a couple times and just play it, and then I'll break it down and talk about it a little bit more. Let me do it again. Okay, so here's what I'm doing. First of all, I'm keeping that 16th note going the whole time, right? Even though we've got that dotted 8th to 16th. Okay, now I am when I go to prepare for those muted 16th notes. I'm intentionally not doing this hand right, but I'm getting rid of that whole chord, and I'm muting as much as I can from there. Now that might be good enough for some, but I'm adding on the downbeat of the first 16th note in that scratched group. I'm adding that slap, that pick slap that we've been talking about to it to give it a little bit more beef. You know, you can hear me hitting the guitar a little bit, and then it squelches whatever strings that I sloppily leave open here from that quick transition. So really slow. Focusing on my strumming. Okay, that's the acoustic. The electric, you have to be much more gingerly on it, even though it sounds meaner in some ways. I am intentionally omitting all the strings. So here, if I did the exact same thing on the electric, it would sound like this. Sorry. That sounds terrible. So I'm doing this instead. Now, this is kind of a cool thing here. I know that I'm not playing those other notes, so I am, instead of fretting the chord, I'm using just a power chord, which allows me to mute better. There. And I can feel free to strum all those on the mute. I'm also not engaging my palm at all. there, like I was on the acoustic. It just sounds meaner then. With the ring and the way things are set up.
Okay, we've got Amit,
hello.
clarified his question
Oh,
from
cool.
earlier. While strumming, my pick gets stuck in between the strings and it produces a scratchy sound. Any suggestions?
Yeah, yeah. The first thing that you want to make sure you're doing is you want to make sure your pick angle's right. And I'm going to review that now. I'm going to go back to the acoustic because it's easier to sort of see and hear. So you're probably getting you're getting the frog sound, right? Such an ugly, horrible sound. You might be getting that kind of thing. Let me know if this is what you're feeling or you're hearing, as opposed to. Now, what am I doing to make that sound? I'm doing it on purpose, but some people do this on accident, and maybe you're doing this. Maybe you're angling your pick. You don't want your pick to be angled, especially when you're playing acoustic guitar. You don't want that. You want it to be, and I covered this in one of the other ones, there's a whole section on holding your pick. So maybe if you haven't watched that, go back and get a little bit more detailed explanation of this, but this should get you started. You want your pick to be attacking as close to flat on each string like this, and you don't want to be doing this, or this. You don't want to be doing that. You want to attack it sort of flat on, both in a perpendicular nature like this, so that you're approaching it again, not angled. But also, you don't want to be doing this or this. And this one's easier to do because sometimes we tend to, depending on how we're holding our guitar, especially when you're practicing like this. Look, I'm strumming this way and I'm not holding my pick straight out. I'm tensing my fingers, and which is causing the pick angle to change, and it's causing that frog croak sound. Relax your pick. Approach it flat on the strings. Don't use any funky angles. And you should get rid of most of that. Thumb pressure is a big part of that too. Don't pressure on your thumb while you're strumming.
Okay, here's one from Gary NY42. Any suggestions for muting a single string, like the D when going between a D and G chord?
Yeah. Any suggestions for muting a single string? Going from a G or a D. So muting, you're probably talking about not hearing it. So we're going from a D to a G chord. Well, the first thing that you want to think about, can you put the question back up? Muting a single string like the D. Why would you want to mute the D when you're going from a D to a... I wouldn't want to mute a D string when I'm going between a D and a G chord. It actually glues the chords together. I like that. I like that it rings out. But if I was going to mute it, I would use this first finger and I would do this. Sorry, I would do this. There, I got it now. I just use this first finger to sneak in there and hit that string to deaden it. But again, it's part of both chords, so I wouldn't necessarily want to do that. General techniques for muting notes within chords are, and I'm doing it here on this note, you're holding your middle finger flat so that it's muting the A even though I'm strumming all of them. That same thing when I'm doing like the C add 9, the D string is being muted under the C. It's being muted with this finger here. Yeah, there we go. You can see this angle here too. Yeah, there we go. See that angle? Okay, the other typical one would be your thumb mute, playing a D string. You can feel more free to strum because you got that thumb going up there.
Okay, we've got one from Greg GP. Trying to go from strumming with an open hand to a closed style. Recommended by some instructors at JamPlay. Finding it clumsy and shredding my knuckles too. Any thoughts?
Yeah, you know, we talked about this earlier. I can't do it either. Closed fist works for some. It shreds my knuckles. It absolutely does, especially when I'm doing some of the techniques that we talked about earlier. I mean, look at this. When I'm trying to palm mute, first of all, my hand tenses up, but look what happens to my knuckles. I can barely do that and show you. It hurts so bad. Doesn't work. There's no benefit for me of doing closed fist. I don't know why you would do it. In my picking, I pick open, and it's fine, I don't see any benefit to doing closed there. Especially when you are when you're going between strumming and picking. It doesn't work for either guitar for me. So I can't suggest to you tips on going from open to closed because I always leave my hand open and relaxed. That works best for me. And with hybrid picking, another reason I like to have my hand open, I do a fair amount of hybrid picking when I'm doing lead stuff, and that if I was closed, that would be an extra step for me.
Okay, and I think this one's going back to when you were just showing the different muting techniques. Is your technique for slapping on the upstroke just for that rhythm?
No. Good question, though, because I haven't done a whole lot of other rhythms. Let's see. Let's do... There's a different one. No, it does. It always happens after one of those quick upstrokes, though. So it's very based around that 16th note feel. Or there's another one. And so those rhythms. I mean, I'm totally just feeling that. I'm not counting it in my head at all. I don't know. I couldn't count that if you asked me to. I'm feeling it. That's a groove that was internalized before it was. Someone else, if they wanted to figure it out, would have to count it. But me, just jamming and strumming, I'm just doing what comes natural and moving that slap around.
Okay, this is the last one I've got for right now.
Okay.
So if there's any other questions, get them up there quick, you guys. Amit, if we are playing electric guitar on clean mode, not using drive and distortion, how should we strum? All string strum or specific strum?
So I used the slightly distorted guitar to accentuate my point about them being different feels and different instruments. In general, you want to have the same things in mind. But it's kind of like someone saying, "It's cold outside, wear a coat." If you hear someone say, "It's cold outside, wear a coat," that you could take that very black and white, like, okay, it's cold outside, well, what? And just put on a coat. But, you might be a little bit too hot. You might not be hot enough. Maybe it's raining and you need a raincoat. You could take this analogy 100 different ways. The point is, it's not black and white, right? It's cold outside, you need a coat. Maybe I should bring a coat. Maybe I should wear layers. Maybe, in the terms of this, hey, it's a different instrument. Play it like it's a different instrument. Now that you know how, and now that you have the perspective to do so, use your own creativity gauge to make it sound natural. Learn both. If it's clean and it sounds good to strum all the strings, strum all the strings. You have perfect permission to do that. But just realize that most of the time, even when it's clean, you're not going to put the same elbow grease into it. And I see people do this all the time. Put the same elbow grease, the same slaps, the same bouncy palm muting. Doesn't sound good, almost ever, on the electric guitar. It sounds better to close in, to tighten up, not tense up, but tighten up a little bit. Use planted palm muting and be more selective about the strings that you strum, because electric guitars just aren't strummed as freely as an acoustic guitar. So, but with that in mind, it's cold outside, put a coat on, can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people in a lot of different situations, a lot of different climates, a lot of different musical climates in this case. Cool. Well, next week, practice this stuff up. Practice the muting, practice the slapping, practice the palm muting, because we're really going to get into it next week with bow diddly rhythms. They're very common rhythms in all styles of music, and they're difficult if you don't have this stuff down. So it's not that you can't do it if you don't have this stuff down, but practicing these grooves, practicing this piece this week with the guitar profile, read along with it, listen back to me, go back and rewatch this, and you're really gonna prepare yourself for the rest of this series, because we're gonna get a lot more into real world rhythmic examples from this point forward. So, if there are no other questions, thank you so much for watching. We will see you next week for bow diddly rhythms. Practice up. Ask questions. I'm here all week. You can ask me questions on the site. You can private message me on the site and ask me questions about it. Happy to enlighten you throughout the week as you're working on this stuff. So, until next week, see you there.